the difference between knowledge and understanding, or knowledge and change. Without this chapter, not so easy to learn in terms of application to change your life or to improve your life. That's why this chapter is very important. This chapter goes into the practical. How can we apply the things we have learned? Okay, so we have gone through now all the way to chapter 12. This is the last chapter, See Better. Okay, now I'm going to just recap the first 10 chapters, actually first 11 chapters. Okay, chapter 1, we look at, oops, why is the slide not it? Chapter 1, we look at affinity and beyond. Basically, our need to belong, our need to be with the familiar. Our what we like is we like homogeneity. Basically, we like people similar to us. Okay, why? Because it's less stressful. Then it helps us to feel belong. So when we do that, then we see we will be blind towards others, the things that we are not familiar. So naturally, when we like those that are similar to us, then we are biased towards those that is familiar to us. Then we will end up being blind to things that we are not so familiar with, right? Yeah. Then chapter 2, we talked about love is blind, about our illusion to protect love. So because we desire love, to love and to be loved, very often we apply willful blindness to block out those things that are not so nice, that may affect the feeling that we have. So love can be a situation that can enhance willful blindness. Then the third chapter talks about dangerous conviction. It's about the ideology or the belief that we hold. So because our ideology and belief that we hold is the one that gives us that builds our identity. So we will tend to protect it, because then we are protecting our identity. Okay, so sometimes if our ideology or our belief is wrong, we may go to the point of willful blindness to protect it. Especially if you see that happening in World War II under Adolf Hitler. Okay, when Adolf Hitler directed a command to wipe out the Jewish race. Okay. Then chapter 4, the limits of our mind. By nature, we are a finite being, so our mental capacity is finite. So even then, always bear in mind, at different stage of our life, based on how much we have trained our mind, there is still a limit. So it's the same like physical strength. The limit of our physical strength is limited by two things. One, our physical capacity, human capacity. There is an ultimate limit. But then there's also the present limit. That means to what extent have you trained your mind? Okay. So we have to be realistic that our mind will to one point will shut our eyes when it gone beyond our mental capacity to cope. Then chapter 5 talks about our natural protective instinct, the ostrich instruction, our mechanism that is inside us to protect us against the uncomfortable, painful, and frightening truth. So whatever uncomfortable, painful, and frightening, right? it already, once we have this, it challenges us to shut, because it's a protect, it's a automatic defense mechanism. So especially when we have uncomfortable, painful truth, then the mechanism can blind us to it. Okay, so we have to be aware of that. Number six is about authority. Okay, somehow our identity is related to our obedience to authority, especially when we are still young and we have to subject to authority. We always want to be on the good side of authority. Then oftentimes we end up, due to desire to be obedient, to be on the good side to authority, we may blind ourselves from seeing certain things in order to appear on the good side, and in order to comply with obedience. Then number 7, the cult of culture. When you are in an organization, the organization culture can succumb pressure on us to conform in order to be rewarded. For us to conform in order to belong. For us to conform in order for us to be eligible to the organization reward structure. So those pressure from the organization culture can create blindness. Then 8, bystander effect. Bystander effect is the burden of responsibility. So in a big group of bystander, it diffuses the burden of responsibility. It diffuses the need to fulfill our responsibility, in thinking that other people can do it. So it blinds us to the fact that we need to do it as well. So it reduces our sense of responsibility to do something from what we see. Transferring that responsibility to other people. In fact, the more there is other people around, the more you will imagine other people will do it, and the more you will transfer and diffuse the responsibility to do something. Number 9, out of sight, out of mind. Okay, gap. Geographical gap, physical distance, hierarchical distance, racial distance. The gap that is between the gap that is created. Okay, once we are, especially when we are looking at physical distance or racial distance or cultural distance or hierarchical distance, right? We are up to another level of culture or of practice. Then we forget about the lifestyle or the culture of other groups. So this is particularly important in an organization, especially in an international organization. You forgot about what it is like somewhere else in another branch, which is different, in another country, which is different, even though you may be in authority responsible for that branch. Or hierarchical, when you become high up in the hierarchy, you forget and you overlook the culture and the needs of those people way down below, who are the foot soldiers. So this creates the forgetfulness, creates the blindness for us to see the very basic needs in a different culture, in a different group of people. And then 10, the last one, how money, demoralizing work, how money enhances moral blindness. How easily we are by materialism, by materialistic reward, it can somehow entice us to overlook certain ethical and moral issues. Okay, now, so these are all the different aspects in which we can be blind. we can somehow in our mind play tricks to be blind. Now, why is blindness a big problem? Why bother to study blindness? Why choose this book? Or maybe in this case, I would like to ask Pei Wen. Pei Wen is the one who initiated the study of this book and then put it up, and then you all sign up for it. There were two choices, I remember. Okay, I offered the other choice. The other choice about systemic thinking. Okay, thinking in system. I was proposing, and then Pei Wen proposes the willful blindness, and then only two or three sign up for thinking in system. All of you, 7, 8 of you, sign up for willful blindness. So my question is why? Okay, good. Thanks, Pei Wen. Anybody else would like to share? Or any other thoughts apart from the one Pei Wen have shared? Okay. Now, I fully agree with what Pei Wen said, but I want to stress one thing. Willful blindness is extremely dangerous. And I mean extremely. And the reason why I put the word extremely is because often we do not recognize the danger of it. It's like this picture. To me, I add in the word extreme because we are not aware. It's like rolling downhill gradually but slowly, and it's not fast enough for you to be scared or worried. And so you are enjoying the yourself rolling downhill, moving at a pace that seems like a holiday, like you're going on a makan angin. But the problem basically is at the end of the road downhill, there is a cliff that can cause you to fall to your death. And you see that especially happening with that Libby. Libby is a good sign. Even the BP, the the refinery, the little problem can cause death. But the problem basically is this: everybody in willful blindness, it is going slowly. It's like boiling the frog slowly, and the frog don't realize it. The water is like going, it's just changing a little bit each time. And when it changes a little bit, you just adjust. Okay? In a way, you may even feel more comfortable, or you may feel that it's not uncomfortable enough until you reach a point that the water is at boiling temperature, right? And you're being cooked alive. That's why willful blindness is gradual death without you panicking. It leads gradually without stirring up any panic. And that's why I say it's extremely dangerous. Yvonne said, I choose the book because I can relate to my daily life and also interested in the psychological aspect behind it. Didn't know about the word willful blindness until the book study. Okay, good. So to me, when I found this book, straight away I put it into reading list because actually the world out there is a description of this picture. The world out there is a description of this picture. And I can relate many examples. One, right? Our economy. It will just keep blowing and blowing and bigger and bigger. Look how expensive things are. And it's picking faster, but we are adjusting to it. Look at our climate issue. People are still not panicking. Everybody is talking about it, but still not panicking. Okay? So there are many issues. And another thing, the way people tolerate unethical practice. People are tolerating, oh, it's not that bad. So to me, willful blindness, that's why it becomes so dangerous. Because people are not panicking with the downhill until they are just before the fall. And by then, it's already too late. Okay? You're already hurt. And then we looked at chapter 11, right? Chapter 11 tells us that actually we don't have to remain blind. Cassandra's show us that we don't have to be blind. There are people in history that can see. So, in other words, we don't have to keep roll downhill. We can get out. We can improve life. We don't have to tolerate with life getting worse to the point of disaster. However, this is where we have to recognize one thing. Yes, we can see, but most of us don't wish to go through life blind. If I ask you, do you want to be blind? No. If I ask anybody in life, would they like to be blind? I don't think there's anybody who say, yeah, I want to remain blind. No. I wish to see. But the problem basically is, yet because the role is too demanding and the cost is too high, they postpone willful sightedness. So they fall back into blindness. First thing is because, wow, so difficult one. Okay lah, wait. A lot of things. Oh, I give very simple example. Okay. Something I know you're not going to like hearing what I say. Edmund Tan again say the same old thing, and making life very uncomfortable for you. But I want to put it close to home so that you can feel it. YMAT, for instance, our philosophy of YMAT, our book study. If I were to ask you, is studying important? Is the book study important? Everybody will say yes. I don't think there's anybody in YMAT who is who has signed up for YMAT, who has gone through YMAT, who has gone through training, will say what we are doing is not right. It's not good. Every one of us will say it's good. But yet, how many actually enroll for the class? Why? Because it's demanding. Because it takes us from what we want to do out there. It takes us from our career and our boss's demand. So if we don't fulfill our career demand and our boss's demand, it costs. But if I don't fulfill the book study demand, I don't feel the cost. And in fact, when at the end comes, you still don't feel the cost because you don't feel what you missed out. Most of the time, we don't feel what we missed out, but we missed out. And that's the problem. But when we pay the cost, we feel it. But the gradual boiling water, we don't feel much of it. We know it's important, but we don't feel it. The second reason why it's so difficult, it adds on, it makes it even more difficult. It's because of this word habit. All habit dies hard. To remember the illustration that Heffernan used in the book, he says that the river bed is deep and we can't shake off millennia of neurobiology and a lifetime of cultural comfort. Habit is familiarity. Habit doesn't rock the boat. Something new is difficult. And it takes repetition. You have to fight the habit. Fighting the habit for 30 days is hard. So two things. The demand of the now is very high and the habit is very hard. But what I want to remind you, even if you don't feel it, is the previous slide. This one. This is what I want to remind you. See the picture. See ahead the disaster that will happen. If you keep this disaster in your mind, hopefully it will give you enough motivation to overcome this. Okay? So if you now desire to overcome this, if you desire to have a fighting chance to overcome willful blindness, then what do I need to do? This is what this chapter says. How can I see better? What do I need to build in myself? What strength do I need to develop in myself to see better? Two words very important. That two characteristics very important that this chapter shows from the examples of the Cassandras. So what can we do to prevent willful blindness from flourishing? In other words, what can we do to stop willful blindness? One, mentally, let's talk about mentally first. Mentally, mindset-wise, what must we do? One, we must recognize the homogeneity of our life, our institution, our neighborhood, and our friends. In other words, we need to recognize that the life around me is familiar to me. Remember? Familiarity, affinity, and beyond. We are prone to familiarity because of our need to belong. But that need to belong and the biasness to be to the familiarity is blinding us from what is not familiar. So we need to begin to recognize that if we remain in our comfort zone of what is familiar, then it will continue to blind us. That's why it says here, diversity isn't a form of political correctness. We don't want diversity because we want somebody in the opposite. No, that's not the point. But we want something different around us to be an insurance. That's why it is diversity is an insurance against internally generated blindness that leaves this institution exposed and out of touch. We want, in other words, when we find, you see, think about it, especially in our college time and in our organization where we work, when we encounter somebody weird, in inverted commas, how many of us approach weirdness to be friend with somebody weird? Not that they are, they are. You will see some people make a move, or maybe one of you will find, oh, I like weirdness. I walk towards weirdness. You somehow have this ability to be attracted to weirdness. Now that's good. Why? Because this weirdness opens the door. Okay? Remove the biasness that you normally have. The big group biasness. And you begin to see the newness. That's why we need to recognize that this homogeneity is there and that we want to go beyond and embrace a bit of diversity. Why? To insure us against blindness. So whenever we feel very comfortable with the environment, with the people around us, we must learn to become alert, and we must learn to be aware that something is wrong. Comfort usually let our guard down. But now that you recognize willful blindness, if you want to overcome willful blindness, instead of comfort making us relax, comfort should make us alert. It should set the alarm bell inside our mind off. It must start ringing when we get too comfortable. So now we begin to recognize the homogeneity in the environment around us. Then from there, we need to acknowledge our biasness because of the homogeneity, because of the familiar. We must begin to realize, straight away must begin to realize, hey, this familiar environment is going to make me biased one-sided. Biased to what is comfortable to me, which means that I am going to miss out on the other side of things that I'm not yet comfortable with. So once we acknowledge the biasness we bring to any group, we have to adjust for them. A balance of bias may be the best we can do. Now, don't swing biasness. Don't reject your initial biasness you have towards homogeneity. There's nothing wrong with that. But it only makes you blind to the other side. So which means that your life is not wholesome. Your view is not wholesome. So what you need to do is do not reject your initial view, which is the one half of it, but you need to to acknowledge the biasness and welcome the diversity and begin to see what is uncomfortable so that you can add in. That's why it's called a balance of bias. So you begin to listen to the other person's point of view instead of trying to shut them up, instead of trying to make yourself feel comfortable by only clinging on to your homogeneous view. So, in other words, in our mind, we begin to welcome differences, begin to be open to listen to differences. So once we begin to do that, okay, not without being defensive, yet without rejecting our own homogeneity, we are not asking you to destroy your identity. No, we are not saying that. That's why you need to be strong enough to say, okay, I'm not letting go of what I know, I'm familiar with, but now I'm opening myself to see better those diversity, the things that are diverse to what I'm familiar with, so that I can bring and add on a more balanced bias, a more holistic perception of things. Okay? So there is now a mental preparedness. We are not talking about skill yet. We are talking about mental preparation, the attitude and the mindset you have to change. Now, when we do that, we need to be understanding towards our limit. We are human, especially at the beginning. The diversity is so difficult. So don't condemn yourself when you struggle with listening and understanding the diversity of things. When you begin to be open, you will find yourself struggling. So you need to acknowledge also the limits of your cognitive capacity. So especially the beginning, you're going to need more time and effort. That's why the huge cost of long hours. So at the beginning, it's not going to be easy for you to understand the things that are not homogeneous to you, that you're not familiar with. But over time, as you build a more holistic, you begin to be able to see. So growing your diversity is going to take time. Okay? And so you have to recognize and accept the limitation of your mind. Okay? Now, at the end, what you need to do is encourage yourself through when you get the results. That's why that's why you read that. Measure contribution by output rather than input. Celebrate those who can go home early. Now, in the work context, in any context actually, but especially in the work context, next time if you become a boss or a supervisor or anything, do not require people to work long hours simply because you work long hours. I know there's a lot of this going on. Boss haven't go home yet. Why you can go home early? It's got nothing to do with go home early. You finish your job, go home lah. It's your capability to get the job done, not how many hours you put in. What's the point of long hours and get nothing done? That's why for a culture, the culture should be to celebrate output, and then how fast output. And if everybody, I hope every boss can see this. Well, that's why the world is in a bad shape. The more tired people are, the worse the output. Now think about it. That's why it is a boiling frog effect. This is what I mean by boiling frog effect. Now think about it. When the boss insists for you to stay and work overtime and work longer hours simply because he cannot finish his job, so he expects you to finish his job, to work long hours. So your mind already tired. The long hours is not going to help. The extra hours, the overtime that you go into is not going to be productive. And worse still, bear in mind, worse still, you go home tired. It affects your family environment. When it affects your family environment, you go home, you also stress because now it affects your family environment. And when it's stressed, then you also don't get enough sleep. And when you don't get enough sleep, the next day you go back to work, you are not going to work fresh with full capacity. And then you work long hours again. And then you go home late again. And then you go home late because you're tired. You also don't get a good family environment. And then you are stressed. And then you get not enough sleep. At the end, your conviction over your company's goal and philosophy eventually wear out. So you become a robot. You are going through the motion. And do you think a person going through the motion can do productive work? No. That's why you look at the bottom half of that same passage in the slide. The sooner we associate long hours and multitasking with incompetency and carelessness, the better. That's why we mustn't associate long hours as hardworking. It's not a positive trait. We mustn't associate multitasking as, wow, very capable. No, it increases carelessness. Working people like this is as smart as running a factory without maintenance. I just described to you. The machine of any organization is the mind of the employees. The health of the mindset of the employees. And when you stress out the mindset health wears out. It's like the machine wearing out. And a worn out machine that doesn't have chance for maintenance, for rest, right? For reboot, right? For re-energizing. You are running the machine of the mind into what? Down the drain. Longkang. And that's what's happening to today's world. And that's why organizations are less effective. Nowadays, many bosses make their employees going through the motion. Yeah. Yet expecting them to achieve zero mistake at work. Yeah, no, it doesn't work. It only enhances willful blindness. It enhances willful blindness. Because they fail to recognize that we are human. It's like a cult to create robot employees. Yes, you are exactly right, Yvonne. You're exactly right. And it's more and more. That's why it's not easy to find a boss that is understanding and that understands this fact. It has reached, that means if you imagine, that means the workplace in this context has almost reached maximum boiling point in this particular issue. Because majority are doing it. Okay, and the majority work on it blindly, like so it is the right thing to do. And when it's so destructive. So eventually all the organization is going to be less and less effective. And when you will get less and less effective, and yet more and more pay and reward, and people are using money to pay for people to work, more and more OT, economy is going to go up. Economy go up with less results and productivity. Okay, so that's why we need to wake up. You need to wake up. So this is under number 1, recognizing the homogeneity. Okay? Recognizing the homogeneity, okay? Recognizing the biasness that you have, switch towards diversity, but yet recognizing the limits that you have. And give yourself time. Okay? Now, once you have done that, then you can start expand. First, it works in you. But you alone is not enough. You need to build momentum. So put more effort into reaching out to those who don't fit in. For your own sake also, when you expand your circle of homogeneity, in other words, when you expand your circle of diversity, right, you expand your influence. And eventually you build a holistic view. And when you build a holistic view, you begin to value diversity. And in valuing diversity, you create a strong team. The best team is a diverse team. Now, why do I say that? You imagine the best set of color pencil or magic color is when you have diverse color and no two color is the same. Isn't it? You got to buy one set of color pencil. If you have got 2 of the same color inside your box of color pencil, you say something is wrong with the color pencil. Every single color is diverse to each other. And that's a good box of color pencil. And that's what we need to begin to see. To value every single color in the color pencil box. Okay? So this is the mindset now you need to develop. Now, bear in mind, developing this mindset in a world that encourages, in a working world that encourages compliance and homogeneity is going to be very tough. But that is precisely good, because when you are comfortable in the environment, it should be an alarm. That should be a warning. So you want the discomfort, not the comfort. Being very isn't enough to combat willful blindness. We need to actively seek this confirmation. Now, this is the toughest of all. After you have seek diversity, after you value diversity, now you value debate. It's what it's called seek this confirmation. In other words, you seek people to challenge what you are, the way you are thinking. You seek people to debate with you, to contradict you to some extent. Why? Very simple. What we know isn't perfect. None of us know perfectly. And without challenge, how can we perfect what we know? So that's why you need the people to challenge us. Now you seek diversity. Now after you find the diversity, you value the diversity, you value the differences. Now you promote debate. Now you are bringing in the actual conflict, so to speak. And most of us are fearful of conflict. In Malaysia, we don't know how to debate. We don't know. We are so scared of debate. Our identity is so attached to being right that we don't know how to be wrong. And when we don't know how to be wrong, we will never learn. We will never improve our way of thinking. So now we must seek the disconfirmation. While doubt isn't a very pleasant condition, certainty is absurd. That's why Voltaire, this is already spoken of hundreds of years ago. None of us know for certain all what the way we think is perfectly right. None. There's no certainty in the way we think. In other words, there's constantly room for improvement. And if we want the improvement, then we must protect dissent, encourage argument and debate, and be willing to endure the noise. This is the mindset change we need to have that is different from the way our mindset in the past. Now we not protect harmony. We are protecting dissension. We are protecting disagreement. We are not protecting harmony. So contradicting, huh? Today's world, we seek the illusion of peace. Okay? The illusion of no conflict, peace, at the expense of improvement, sightedness. So now we need to turn the other way around. We need to protect this argument and debate that is going on. That's why in YMAT, we also have this. Sometimes argument goes so long. Ayo, why spend so much time in argument? People get restless, people get uneasy, fear of conflict. And then they begin to apply willful blindness. Shove the conflict under the carpet. Ignore the conflict. Ignore the unresolved conflict and pretend that everything is fine. Willful blindness. And now, in order to see better, we must go the opposite. Now, bear in mind, I'm not asking you to be the devil's advocate and encourage dissension to the point where it's disruptive. Don't get me wrong. I'm not encouraging you to create breakup. And the whole point of the dissension and the argument and debate is for expansion of perception, of seeing. That's why remember the purpose of the dissension. Remember the purpose of the argument or the debate is to help everybody see better so that they can perform better, not to result at the end with breakup or breakdown. That's not the purpose. But without the dissension, it cannot create the diversity that expand the wholesomeness, the holistic view. Okay? So, in order to help us understand, the book uses the riverbed. So, using the riverbed analogy, what dissonance and third opinion offer is a tributary that takes you somewhere else, gives you a different perspective. It isn't so wildly different that it is irrelevant, but it stops you sinking into a place where you cannot see what happens around you. Basically, the idea is using the riverbed is whenever you have the dissension, somebody bring out a new opinion, which at the beginning doesn't seem to quite fit in. Then basically, there is a new stream. And the new stream is shallow. It's not deep. It's not sunken. Your view, which you have been holding for years, based on homogeneity, based on familiarity, is sunken deep. And the more sunken you are in the riverbed, the harder it is for you to see anything else. So when somebody brings in a new idea and a new way of looking at things, is creating a new tributary, and always new tributary is very shallow, and in the shallowness of things you can easily see other options. That's what it's saying, and it prevents you sinking even deeper in your familiar deep sunken riverbed. Okay, Yvonne have a question. How to not fear for conflict at workplace? Because once you break harmony, things like office politics happen. Yes. This is where immaturity of culture comes in. And this one got to do with the leader. Got to do with the leader. You see, for the leader or the manager and the manager has the power to reward and punish. So the manager must reward constructive conflict and punish destructive politics. Does that make sense? What about me as an employee if I'm not the boss? Very simple. I can also reward and punish. How I do that is the reward and punish is not as significant, but it still works. My reward and punish, very simple. I reward by participating and enjoying. Because when I participate and enjoy and affirm, the other person is rewarded, and then the other person will continue constructive conflict. And I punish destructive politics. Very simple. I move away. I block off. I leave. Don't be afraid to leave the party despite how strong they are. It doesn't matter if wrong is wrong, to leave this destructive politicking. That's why destructive politicking try to gain forces by getting more people to comply with them. And when they can get, then they are rewarded with destructive politics. That's why they continue the politicking. For two reasons. One, the boss never stops them. Two, their fellow employee doesn't know how to reject them. Also, if you are a lower position, they won't take you seriously when you want to point something out. Well, you have to be firm. You have to keep going at it. When you have, they won't take you seriously when you want to point out something out. Okay, let me rephrase. They won't take you seriously yet when you want to point out something. When you want to point something out. When they did not take you seriously in one occasion, does that mean that they won't take you seriously at all? How sure are you that it did not still bother them and leave a remnant of thought in their mind? Are you persistent enough, and do you believe enough with what you say to be persistent in getting through? Now remember, it's not whether you are it's not whether you are hurt. If it is right, it's right. Your goal is not to be hurt. Your goal is to pursue what is right. Politics needs attention. The lesser attention they get, the lower influence they will be. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Two things stop politics. One, the boss. Two, their peers. Okay? There is a war of influence in any organization. The war of influence is, sadly enough, the politics are winning, and the people who try to do good are giving up too quickly. Why? Very simple. Because politics, they are able to gain majority of those fence sitter, whereas the one who's standing for right very often starts with standing alone. Always remember, the right is a minority. Okay? Actually, the politics is also a minority, but they get the fence sitter very quickly. Majority is actually the fence sitter. The middle part is always the majority. The people who don't care, the people who don't to rock the boat, the people who, oh, you entertain me, I will come. But the persistent is the right. Okay, this is based on my experience. I pointed out the wrongdoing of the boss, and ever since the boss has been going against me every single time, saying that I'm not good and can't do things. My friend, I need to get onto the boss good side. So this is the reality of workplace. Yes. Now, question basically is this. Okay? Are you thinking short term or long term? Short term, yes. You want to get on your boss good side. But in the process, you pick up all the bad habits. Why? Very simple. If you don't know how to fight a bad boss, you have one precedent of giving up and not fighting against a bad boss. You will have a second precedent of not fighting against a bad boss. And eventually you will have a habit of complying with a bad boss. So what do you want? Short term versus long term. Now, let me ask you also another thing. Majority is in the pot of boiling water. Does that mean you want to also join them in the boiling water? Because why? Because all of them are sitting in the boiling water, and you want to be on good side of the people who are sitting inside the pot of boiling water. You jump out, they anti you. Yeah, fact of life. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Okay, what Jin Lee has pointed out is two separate things. First is your conviction to stay true. Second is how to. What I'm pointing out is first, do not give up your conviction of what is right. And that's what I'm trying to say. How to. Now, that's a different ball game. There are many different ways. Your how to will depend on your boss personality. Your how to will depend on the culture. Your how to will also depend on the position. Your how to also will depend on the relationship you have built with your boss. There are many factors that contribute to how to, which leads to how effective are you in what you do, what you're convicted to do. But what I'm saying is not about how to. How to is a different ball game. You have to go trial and error. But what I am saying is your conviction to. You mustn't give up. It's what I'm saying. Now, if you don't give up, then the question becomes, then what can I do? How do I go about doing it? The speed in which you go about doing it is depends on the situation, depends on the circumstances. But you don't give up. So what I'm saying is you don't give up. You continue to maintain the diversity. You continue to maintain the lookout for disconfirmation. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Okay. Let's take this case. Your boss, for instance, you have talked to your boss. Now, when you have talked to your boss now reacted negatively. There are two things you will do. Boss, you can do. One, give up. Okay, lo? Forget about it. I'm not going to talk to my boss anymore about this thing. Okay, I just stay out of trouble. I will keep everything to myself. Now, that's not good. Then you are succumbing to comfort. And now you are applying willful blindness. You are turning a blind eye. Second, do not repeat your mistake. That means the first thing that you didn't quite work out. So if you want to be sighted, willful sightedness, I will not succumb to willful blindness. I will not pretend I did not see it. I'm still seeing it, and I still believe what I'm seeing is right. Now my question becomes, okay, the way I talked to my boss didn't work the first time. So now how can I approach it differently? You see what I'm saying? So when he says, my friend say that I need to get on the boss good side, I don't know. Okay? Yes and no. If can. If cannot, I don't see the need to. Okay? This is the reality of workplace. Yes, in many cases, but no. There are some good places that doesn't think like that. But anyway, regardless of the reality of workplace. Now, if reality is bad, do we accept reality and allow bad to remain bad? The only way for us to overcome what is bad is to acknowledge reality, but do not accept that as the reality that you are going to live with. You acknowledge it. I will encourage you to acknowledge reality. but do not accept as, okay, this is life. I will comply. I don't want to rock the boat. I will stay with reality of workplace. No. My advice for you is very simple. Acknowledge reality. You need to acknowledge reality to change reality. I don't deny reality of what is out there. And so what do? I want to educate people of the harmfulness of that reality. So I acknowledge the reality, and then I figure out how to deal with that reality. That's choosing not to be blind. Choosing remain sightedness, but now you go to the step of, okay, how do I deal with what I see and overcome it? That's the how-to. Now, what Jin Lee mentioned, that's her how-to. So what I'm warning you against is don't succumb to blindness. That's what I'm encouraging you not to do. Because blindness, the danger of willful blindness, leads to disaster. You will join the group of deteriorating circumstance that will lead to disaster. Can understand what I'm saying? Any? Okay. Okay, we move on. Just now it's the mindset you need to have if you want to see better. Okay? Now, what are the skills you need to develop? Two critical skills we need to develop in ourselves to see better. One, critical thinking. We need to be able to think through what we see. We need to. Now, that's why we have to start with resisting the urge to please other people. Resisting the urge to comply. Resisting the urge not to rock the boat. Resisting the urge to run away from conflict. This is the first thing we need to. Then we confront. We look as deeply as we can. Now, that's the problem with today's education. Let me say this. The education system today doesn't promote critical thinking. Education institutions today are teaching students an intellectual form of obedience. That is, they reward the right answer. They don't reward the correct process of finding an answer. It's different, huh? In other words, a person who has a wrong answer may still be rewarded if the process has some right component. Last time when I when I used to be a maths lecturer, I always told the student, okay, if you just give me the right answer, let's say the question is 10 marks, let's say, okay? If you give me the right answer, I will give you 2 marks. 2 marks. If let's say there are 5 steps or 4 steps, I will always allocate marks for the steps. So for each step that the students show me that is correct, I will allocate 2 marks. So a student may, in the working, showing me the working, right? And then show me, and then he made a careless mistake, and then the answer is wrong. I may give that student 6 or 8 marks. Whereas the student who don't show me the working, just give me, write down the answer, I will give student 2 marks. This is very, very crucial. But however, today, we promote right answers more than we promote critical thinking. That means the process of finding the right answer. So this way of education is promoting uncritical thinking. It's a form of blind obedience. In other words, we are just trying to give an answer that makes the teacher or the boss happy. Which is why if you are in this form of education and you get an A, if you will do anything in blind obedience for an A in exam in your education, then you will do anything for your boss to get the boss compliment or reward. This is called blind obedience. This is a lack of critical thinking. This is merely trying to give the boss what the boss wants, despite the fact that you're not even evaluating whether what the boss wants is right or wrong. So our whole education system is promoting less and less critical thinking. So how do we train ourselves to think for ourselves, challenge what we see, be prepared to turn our assumption upside down and examine them? This is very important. In other words, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we get the answer the way we get? Why do we get such an answer? How did we get to this answer? So how do we teach ourselves to resist the influence of the situation in which we find ourselves? How did the situation end up like this? What is the consequence that this will lead to? In other words, think through the whole route, the whole process from beginning. This is where you can also anticipate what is to come if we continue practicing what we are practicing today. And if we know that, then we can jump ship before the ship crash. Otherwise, we may have a good position in the ship, but absolutely have no idea where the ship will end up at the end of the journey, which can be disastrous. What's the point of finding the best seat in a ship heading for the waterfall? What's the point of being positioned in the best seat in an organization that's going to collapse? So we need to think deeper. We need to think more completely. Thinking of the process is far more difficult than knowing the answer. Ask, why is this answer the correct answer? How to go about the correct answer? Now, the other thing we need to understand basically is this. A correct answer in class is very, very often, very, very likely not the correct answer out in the world. Why? Because the circumstances has changed. The correct answer today is most likely not the correct answer tomorrow, because tomorrow's situation will be different from today's situation. So if you don't know how to go about finding the correct answer, and you don't know the condition whereby which affect the correct answer, then you will never discover your correct answer tomorrow, even if you know the correct answer today. Which is why very often scholars in education are not successful out in the world, because the answer that they produce in their exam paper, right, is not the same answer that is required out in the workplace. Then the second thing you need to do, basically, now the second thing, courage. Yvonne, you just brought it up. When you bring out all this, when you begin to confront issues, you're going to rock the boat. And a lot of time, authority today, because of their fear of conflict, and because they associate the lack of conflict to the success of their leadership, then it's going to make it difficult for you to bring out issues like this. And that's why courage becomes a necessary thing. The courage to confront the fear of conflict that so often leaves us paralyzed. And mind you, today's environment doesn't encourage. It's more than the fear of conflict. The fear of disapproval. The fear of the not only the boss's disapproval, the fear of the culture's disapproval. Because the peer pressure of majority who wants the illusion of peace. So we need to develop the courage to have a descending voice to induce different cognitive processes when we are worried by what we see that yield better judgment. Now, it starts, of course, with ourselves. Now, which is not the most difficult. If you are in YMAT, I presume it's not that difficult for you to create the descending voice in you. However, it's so much tougher to initiate the descending voice among your people you work with. And this is where the how-to comes in. Okay? And it's tough. It's tough. Really tough. And it may be very slow. And to be honest, this is where you need to recognize, remember the limits. Everything has limit. You cannot expect change overnight. You have to recognize what is called the organizational context. That means the construct and the culture. The organizational structure and the culture that is there, how long it has been like that. So some structure and some culture is so hard, and it's going to take years to initiate change. So the organizational context will affect the condition for willful blindness and will affect how responsive your effort will be able to create. The organizational context is the idea of how hard the organizational structure and culture is. If it is rock hard, then you need to whack it more times before you expect to see crack. But if it is still tofu stage, then you will see respond quicker. So the older an organization, the more structure an organization, the likelihood is the harder is the context for change. And in such environment, greater courage is required because the courage that lasts. Because you cannot just swing once. You don't know how many times you have to swing at it. Maybe accepting the limits of your capability. Maybe you give up and leave the company before you create even any crack in the organizational context. Tough, let me say it's really tough. That's why really need courage. The courage really required. Now, the other thing encourage you to do is make sure you go and find data. Take enough time to do research to find useful, relevant, current data that is potentially powerful. Okay? Now, in the process of collecting data that will help you to think through whether right or wrong, whether what is the right thing to do, then you not only need to find data, you make sure you don't find the same person for the data, because the same people will give you the same answer and will continue to limit your sightedness to the homogeneous, to the familiar, to it will be biased. So you need to listen to the opposite side in order to get a balanced, bias, a wholesome perspective. Then apply back critical thinking. Okay. Now your data need to be applied back to critical thinking. If one of the symptoms of blindness is comfort, one of the indicator of critical thinking will be discomfort. That's why unanimous decisions are intrinsically suspicious. When everybody agree, is that a good thing? No, based on willful blindness. Recognizing willful blindness, everybody agree means something is very wrong with the culture. Unanimous decisions are incomplete decisions made when there is too much power in the room, too much obedience, and too much conformity. Caution, the sheer complexity of many decisions make blindness all the more tempting. Sometimes some decision is very complex. And when some decision very complex, it even enhances blindness. Why? When we have complex decision, people don't want to think. So, yeah, without thinking, they will say what? Okay, never mind, can. Yeah, can. Why? Because it's easier to say yes than to try to understand the complex decision. So in decision making, please do not be wary of unanimous decision and be wary of complex decision. So in your critical thinking process, you must try to simplify, and having dissension in the decision making is good, because then you begin to be able to see a more holistic, wholesome view. Our desire to be entertained cripples our need to be informed. This is where sometimes we also have the fear, oh, nice, very entertaining, the idea very good, Be very careful. We can end up being entertained by ideas, okay, but not willing to go deeper, to think through the ideas, okay. If you can't be bothered to know what is going on, you have no right to complain. That's why at the end of the day, once you start comply, then don't complain. Okay? Once you start to comply, don't complain. But very often we want to comply and yet complain behind. Meaningless. Okay? Meaningless. This comes down to whether you think of yourself as a child and a victim, or as an adult who can make changes. So this is a measure of maturity. But think through very clearly. Your ability to see is a sign of maturity. Your ability to handle dissension is a sign of maturity. Your ability to work through complexity and come out with the best solution in the midst of dissension and conflict is a sign of maturity. So at the same time, bear in mind, again, chapter 4, I think, cognitive limits of our mind. Remember, we have our limits. Okay, so are we in danger of building monstrosity we can't run? Be careful. Too big a team, too big an organization, too complex an organizational structure. Now, this one doesn't apply to most of you, but be wary of the organization that you join. Have you built a corporation that in that size of complexity and impact are simply too dangerous? Once it's too big, you cannot keep track. And once you cannot keep track, then you are in danger of disaster. So we always need to accept the effective limits of the organization, and when they get too big to manage, break them up to smaller size. So two things now very important: skill. First is your mindset, then is the skill. Skill you need to develop, critical thinking. Now, bear in mind, once you succumb to willful blindness, you limit critical thinking. You stop seeing, you limit your thinking. Correct? Every time you see something new, you have to think. You see something new, your jigsaw puzzle gets more complex. Now it enhances your critical thinking. Right? That's why willful blindness limits critical thinking. Of course, limits your courage too. Okay? Okay, we are finishing soon. Any questions so far? I know it's quite deep. I'm going quite, but these are all in the book. That's why I have to go through. I feel this is important for you to understand what you need to do, at least the mindset you need to have, and the skill you need to develop in order to build the strength to overcome willful blindness. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, final. Willful blindness is a choice. We make ourselves powerless when we choose not to, but we give ourselves hope when we insist on seeing and looking. Every time we open our eyes to something new, it enhances hope. Hope for something better. Every time we succumb to willful blindness, we succumb to self-defeat and comply to what is. We have given up hope, basically. You just give up. You give up to what is. That's what willful blindness do. Willful blindness is allowing yourself to give up to what is. Willful sightedness is the one where you choose based on hope. You choose to find something better. That's why it's hope. It's a choice. Hope is tough because willful sightedness is tough. So you have to ask a lot of questions to see. Seeing requires asking questions. Don't have to ask tough questions or long, complex questions. Ask simple questions, but simple, tough questions. What could I know? Should I know that I don't know? Very tough question, but simple. What am I missing? Okay? Or why is this happening? Okay? What is the other person seeing? Begin to put yourself in the position to see things you have never seen before, or see the same thing in a way that you've never seen before. Put yourself in the position to see things which stirs up a lot of question in your head. Because this question in your head is what's able to help you see, and in seeing, reduce your willful blindness. Actually, willful blindness is very much physical as well. It's a physical lifestyle. When you are too busy, it's likely you are willfully blind. Because when you are too busy, that means you are only seeing what you are normally seeing every day. How will you have time to see something new when you are too busy catching up with what you have on hand? When you don't even have time out to open your mind to remove the filter that affects the way you see. You need to slow down to see the same thing in a new way, the same old thing in a new way. And this is what is very important. It's not changing what you see. We don't have to go to someplace new to see new things. We need to change and slow down our mind, and then open up our mind to see the same old every day in a new way. This will enhance your willful sightedness. Any question? I have 2 more slides. That's all. The final 2 slides. Now, this book, very powerful book. Okay? But it's a very difficult. Because we are in a society that is very strongly willfully blind. Okay? We are in a culture that promote comfort and peace and avoidance of conflict. Okay? And maintain the illusion of peace. We are in that kind of culture. We are also part of that kind of race for most of us. That's part of our upbringing as well. So change is going to be difficult. And this is where I want to just remind you about the AAA-CARD. It hasn't changed. Now, you all are become aware through the study of this book of what willful blindness and its danger and the difficulty of willful sightedness. So if you really want to change your lifestyle and live a life of willful sightedness, you are moving in the direction of discomfort, as we have seen in this chapter. That's what it is. The more you want to see, the more you want to act, the more discomfort you must confront and accept. So from this end of this book, you have become aware. You have the opportunity to move upwards, but you must be ready to accept discomfort, disconfirmation, confront conflict, Because otherwise, you will move in the other direction and go back to sleep. That's why very often we have situations where after we have come to know something, we have learned something, but many years down the road, we have forgotten about it, and something that we have learned make zero impact. Why? Very simple. It has merely an indication of the choice we have made, the will that we have, the decision we have made, we have chosen to either confront, move towards discomfort, or fall back to comfort and go back to sleep. If we move towards discomfort, we will experience growth. No question about it. You will find yourself growing because growth is uncomfortable. But if you fall back to discomfort, you will get left behind. You will get stagnant. And before you know it, you are in a rut. Now, while you are still young, and while you are still fighting, you have the best fighting chance to develop a habit of growth. Later, when your family starts and the pressure of and the responsibility of your different roles in life starts to pick up, I can assure you, it will be even much harder to develop the habit of growth, to come face to face and accept the path of discomfort. After today, starting from now, you have a choice to make. Whether the past 3 months you have invested every week about 2 hours a week, will it result in growth, or will it merely dissolve into nothing? So that's a choice you have to make. If you really want it growth, then you have to keep doing something. And you have to start now. Okay? Something to keep it alive. Okay? Okay. That's all for that's all that I have for you.